Good evening. Good evening. How's everybody doing this evening? Good, good. It's a very comely crowd, I have to say. Good evening, and on behalf of everybody at Penn American Center, welcome to our third annual Prison Writing Benefit Reading. My name is Rakesh Satyal, and I'll be your host of sorts for this evening. For more than 30 years, Penn's prison writing program has been on the front lines of prison reform, helping inmates in federal, state, and local penitentiaries cope with life behind bars, gain skills, and have a voice while they are imprisoned. Our program is essential as the United States has the highest documented incarceration rate in the world, with nearly 2.5 million people incarcerated as of 2007, 70% of whom are non-white. Penn's prison writing program accomplishes its extraordinary work through one-on-one mentorships and an annual writing competition that receives between 20 to 30 entries per day, including from prisoners on death row. The entries come to us, unlike most pieces of correspondence in this technological age, via snail mail. The prison writing program sends each inmate who contacts us a free copy of the very helpful prison writing handbook. This handbook, which you can purchase at one of the tables in the lobby of the venue outside, is a resource for these men and women. Tonight's event will not just showcase and celebrate some of the finest entries that we received for our prison writing competition via Penn's friendly postman, but we also hope to raise a little money in the process. We'll have 6 remarkable readers: Talib Kweli, Junot Diaz, Dierbeck, Wahida Clark, Dalpiaz, and Wally Lamb. They require no introduction, although if you want to clap, please do. But to learn more about them, please check their bios in the program distributed to you as you entered. In the second portion of tonight's program, Jackson Taylor, the head of the prison writing program, will speak with writers Wally Lamb and Barbara Parsons on the importance of programs such as the Penn Prison Writing Program. We have a wonderful raffle, and in the break between the reading and the panel, I'll be back to announce the fantastic prizes. All proceeds will go to support this important program, so be prepared for that. Be very prepared for that. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce Steve Eisenberg, Executive Director of Penn American Center, who will say a few words about the organization.
Thank you and good evening. Penn rests on the premise that literature, the precious exchange between writers and readers, and freedom of expression are the pillars of our organization and its purposes. And for us, the connecting force is an international fellowship. Penn is comprised of writers and literary professionals and supporters who help other writers who face distress in terms of the dark shadow of censorship, oppression, or jail. Our primary activities are human rights advocacy for those like Liu Xiaobo in China, jailed for 11 years for calling for democracy, who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, and public programs such as our recent one in solidarity with Mexican journalists and writers facing terrible conditions in Mexico. In May, that brings writers from around the world together in New York over several days. Our work with students in our Readers and Writers program and our Penn Journal all steer by the same principles of protecting free expression and promoting literature. Founded in 1971, Penn's prison writing program, so ably led by Jackson Taylor and coordinated by Jonathan Dozier-Ezell and Tim Small, with generous help from the New School and their MFA students, as well as interns from colleges, other colleges and universities, maintains a program that receives writing from prisoners and offers them suggestions by a thoughtful reader and through correspondence. Penn's Handbook for Writers in Prison is itself a model of sensible and useful instruction. And just a word that brings all things together in one life on my behalf and my colleagues, and Larry Seams, the director of our Freedom to Write program. Lucy Cavaller, at 87 years old, died on Saturday with over decades of dedication to freedom to write, and was one of the founders of this prison writing program. When the season of submission for Penn's Prison Writing Awards is upon us, I see our tables filled with envelopes, and I'm always moved by this sight. It is a reminder that behind walls and bars, the imagination lives, and that writing represents a way of rehabilitation and a force against resignation and isolation and the possibility of a road back. To all who make this program what it is, to the performers and writers here tonight, to each of you for coming this evening to make your contribution, thank you.
And now, without further ado, I'd like to reintroduce our wonderful readers tonight, Talib Kweli, Junot Diaz, Lisa Dierbeck, Wahida Clark, Sean Dalpiaz, and Wally Lamb.
This is the voice of Robert Garite. I'm reading from his piece, which won the honorable mention essay for this past year. It's called Shimmers of Light. So for a moment, try to put yourself in the shoes of someone who is on their way to prison. Imagine having done something wrong, something you can't even believe you let yourself do, but once you arrive at the county jail and pass through a series of doors that eerily click shut behind you, you realize that life will never be the same. Right then, remorse and shame start to permeate your thoughts. Now, your arrest may have suddenly interrupted years of bad behavior you know you should have stopped long ago, but these thoughts don't change much. You have other problems to deal with now. You soon find yourself surrounded by complete strangers, individuals who are themselves at a very low point in their lives. For the most part, everyone seems completely indifferent to you, except for the fact that you have to share everything together. If you have half a brain, you realize that when someone does approach you and strikes up a conversation, they probably want something. And although it seems like there is always someone around, you've never felt so alone. Quickly, it comes to your attention that there are rules for everything. Even when you can talk, when you can eat, officers have rules, inmates have rules, and somehow you have to find a way to follow them all. But one thing is certain, one way or another, you will comply. Furthermore, concrete, iron, barbed wire blot out the sky, and they serve as constant reminders that there is no way out.
Good evening. This poem that I'm reading is by Frank Jackson III, 1976 poetry winner. It's called Got the Message. In this land of Coca-Cola, the real thing deserving a break today, but not between a sesame seed bun, took stock in America while singing, "We shall overcome," and got a cold slap in the face. And goddamn if I ain't tired of getting chased every day by some 100% all beef patty police. The lame is trying to snuff me with a Hawaiian punch, as Mr. Whipple looks on getting his uncold nuts off while squeezing the toilet paper. Look, the minute that I got militant, I got a threatening letter from the CIA, said in part, "Please don't fiddle with the Oreo middle." Well, just to prove a point, I went to Chase Manhattan looking for a friend and got a violent chemical reaction. Yes, from FBI agents disguised as cookie-cutting L's, and don't think calling a Roto-Rooter man will send my troubles down the drain. Uncle Ben even tried to convert me. He said he built my body in 12 different ways, but I told him I be thinking I'm feeling free, so he tried to get me to join the Pepsi generation. But they ain't really here to stay. Why? The kind of double protection I be needing ain't in no Canada deodorant. I got a surprise when I told him I felt like I was the one, 'cause he wished and said as he tap danced away, "You is right. They got your black cakes frying." And it seemed like every time I get a new lease on life, I get zapped with a raid. But hey now, just like them roaches in my kitchen, I'm getting immune.
John Mack's poem, Grace, winner of the Poetry Award, 1977. And the other God, in the late hours of the night, and dripping with blood and grime, came through side streets, creeping among shadows, along the walls of tall buildings, and with trembling lips and fearful eyes, whispered and bade me, "Search the chamber of my heart for poetry, or seek his grace with the vicious use of my knife."
Hi guys, I'm reading for Zachary Redfern, August 22nd, Friday. I've been stressed out about starting a new job. Scrubbing pots isn't easy work, and I am not a youngster anymore. It's all right though. Everyone helps each other out. They can't leave until we're all done. Another prisoner in this pod is writing trivia questions for a British website. He has friends that he sends them to. That person puts them on the site. There may be monetary compensation involved. He asked me if I wanted to write questions too. I went to the library today for research. I'm lousy at trivia, but writing good questions is a skill. You want to make them interesting and fun. There are so many little ways people can make money out there, but they're often not worth doing. But for someone who makes $10 a month, they're all worthwhile.
So somehow, the days start turning into weeks, court dates come and go, and once you finally get your sentence, you're transported to a real prison. Hopefully, you avoid a maximum security penitentiary, but either way, you won't be fully prepared for what you encounter. During the bus ride, you sense that this will be one of the last times you will be in traffic for a while. And so you start to soak in the sights. You realize that you're taken for granted. Things like trees, grass, regular people. Once you pull into the prison, you know you'll be glad to be rid of the cuffs that have been biting into your wrists for the past few hours. But as the gates shut, you also realize that what's waiting for you probably can't be any better. Life has been irrevocably altered. The people you find yourself around now have been doing time for years, and now people watch to see what you are made of. And there are, of course, more rules to follow. But it seems like the consequences are more serious than ever before. Although at first things are subject to change without notice, maybe you get lucky and find a safe little niche for yourself, somewhere people don't seem to notice you very much. But either way, it doesn't take long for you to figure out that the less you leave your cell, the fewer problems you encounter.
I'm reading for Keanu Cook, Cummins Unit, Grady, Arizona. I've discovered something more cohesive than loyalty, something more vicious than faith, something even more cementing than creed or culture could ever be. Cigarettes. Ever since the ADC has cut out and outlawed smoking, I've seen cigarettes do some amazing things. I've witnessed them bring blacks and whites, Bloods and Crips, vice lords and disciples, Christians and Muslims, Aryan nation and black nationalists together. The same culture or group of people that proclaim their hatred or dislike for another culture or group of people smoke cigarettes with that avowed enemy. Cigarettes are power, real power. A dude with a cigarette can get about any staunch smoker to do anything he wants them to. Cigarettes can get a dude killed. A real shame, sure, but that is the penitentiary. That is the power of nicotine.
Sometimes it may even feel like you've been caught in the midst of a powerful storm. The winds of this storm constantly batter you with the force of uncertainty, of never knowing whom you can trust or what might happen around you next. The thunder that booms resonates with the incessant noise created from too many people crammed together in a space that wasn't designed to hold so many. And its unnatural darkness is thick from a multitude of restrictions that seem to completely obscure the outside world from your view. And when the lightning from the anger that surrounds you flashes, you get the sense that you should probably find something to use for cover. You also notice that there are a lot of people around you who are heavily medicated and probably need to be somewhere else other than in the general population of a prison.
Hello, everybody. I'm reading for Chastity West, third place memoir, 2010 excerpt, Left Behind. Everybody lock up, the guard barked over the intercom. Get in your cells now. Oh, God, what now? One of the girls asked. There's a code purple, someone announced. Somebody hung up in Building 2. Building 2 hosts the youth for offenders and a mental health program. This wasn't good. Either a child or someone emotionally fragile had attempted suicide. My roommate was out of the unit, so I stood alone in the dark cell. A code purple? Whoever she was, whatever her story, I knew that it wouldn't end well. The cell door opened with a click, and my roommate came puffing into the room. Her hand groped for the light switch and flicked it on. Did you hear? Mimi asked. There was a code purple in Building 2. They said it was Rosa. Rosa Munoz? Really? That doesn't sound like something she'd do. My roommate shrugged her shoulders and plopped down onto her cluttered bed. Everybody has a breaking point, she said. Staff kept fucking with her when she went off on that red-headed rookie who was messing around with Cammie Kanutsky. Once she let it rip, the staff targeted her, kept harassing her, ticketing her. When she came out the hole, she just wasn't the same. I hadn't seen Rosa in weeks, but I was all too familiar with the classic DOC technique. Punish and silence the inmate who knows too much and dares to make a public accusation. And the most effective way to break her spirit is to throw her into solitary confinement. Put her on investigation. Teach her a lesson and let it serve as a warning to anyone else stupid enough to think that they have a voice. Rumors quickly circulated throughout the prison. She's a vegetable, a girl seated beside me in the cafeteria stated. No, her lunch partner corrected. I heard that she woke up and took a breath on her own. As soon as the swelling goes down in her brain, they're going to ship her back here. She coded in the hospital, a passerby chimed in. No, that's not true, a blonde-haired girl with a mouthful of sandwich yelled after her. She's in stable condition. Nuh-uh, critical. No, she's being discharged by the end of the week. How can that be? A thin voice cut in. I heard she's dead. Gabrielle, one of the facility's social workers, came by a few days after Rosa's suicide attempt. I knew that it couldn't be good. Anytime Gabby showed up to the Lifers building, we knew to expect bad news. Whatever you believe in, Gabby said, as she took a seat at one of our tables, Now may be a good time to offer some good thoughts for Rosa. It doesn't look very good for her right now. When Gabby left, I stood with my back facing the door and felt the inside of my nose stinging. I imagined Rosa's small body draped in a pale blue Johnny, lying still in a white hospital bed, her ankles shackled to the bed rail, though she posed no threat to anyone. I could hear the rhythmic gush of air made by the respirator, the beep of strange machines. I could see each of the plastic tubes that were connecting her to life. I saw small bruises atop her pale hand and in the crease of her arm, the small strips of medical tape holding needles in place. I wondered if there was some form of consciousness beyond her unconscious body. Would she have frightening, fragmented thoughts or experience a complete and euphoric clarity? What did it feel like to slip into perfect peace, to have a day outside of these walls?
Dana Schultz, Dawson Prize for Poetry, 2010, Feather. A single feather fell from my ceiling. I certainly was not expecting that. Nor was I expecting such a feeling from inside this jail cell where I've sat minute after day after month, sitting, waiting for a sign, waiting for a hope. A feather falls, and I guess it's fitting that something so simple would help me to cope. Coping's not living, it's just getting by. But it's also getting up out of bed and giving this life the best you can try. I can't get that image out of my head. How did a feather get into this place? And the smile it put upon my face.
This is for Hal Cobb, from Hal Cobb, Honorable Mention Poetry 2010. It's a salsa meditation. My hands will smell for days of onions, garlic, and jalapenos, despite repeated washings after slicing, dicing, and mincing with my trusty little matic and plastic picnic knife, essential utensils of a prison prep chef in a concrete and steel kitchen. I love the feel of a ripe tomato, a ripe, juicy tomato, the fresh earthiness of chopped green pepper, the abundant aromas attack my olfactory senses, tempting and teasing my palate with anticipatory explosion of first taste. And in that moment, I am awakened, enlivened, emboldened, transported from bland grayness of confinement to full sensory recall of my essential humanity.
This is for Thomas Berkelbaugh, third prize poetry, 1987. The short on Q, as in cucumber, range. The Q range officer called down to the cell block desk sergeant. There's a short on Q range. Electricity out, not even lights. Inmates refuse to lock up. Several more requests by the range officer asking for Sergeant Smith what was to be done. Passage of 7 minutes more. Desk Sergeant Smith called his response back up to Q range on a bullhorn. All residents of Q, as in cucumber range, lock up immediately. I have checked the warden's list of authorized items. A short is not on that list. Therefore, I can only conclude that a short must be a contraband item. Whomever has the short, surrender to the Q, as in cucumber, range officer. If found with a short in your possession, you will be disciplined to the max. Don't stand there staring down at me. Lock up now. The inmates on Q range stared blankly at the surroundings and at each other. Dealing with the mentality of Sergeant Smith was a losing proposition at best. They all proceeded to lock up in the dark, mumbling to themselves. Sergeant Smith turned to a guard standing by his desk and asked, in all sincerity, "Didn't we have a similar contraband short problem on F as in Philadelphia range about a year ago?"
Distractions like homemade alcohol, drugs, TV sets, and even excessive sleep may offer you some temporary relief, quick fixes that distract you from the conditions of your new home. But as the seasons start to fade away, your heart and your mind grow a little numb from the fact that no matter what you do, you will still be confined for a fixed period. It even occurs to you that the exactness of your out date seems somewhat irrational in its exactitude. When every day is essentially the same, what makes one day or 1 year any different from another? Something else that doesn't make much sense is the fact that all of the people you imagined being there for you when you get out don't even send you letters anymore, asking you about how you're doing. And it slowly dawns on you that people really are moving on in their lives without you.
Hey guys, we're going to be reading from a long piece of memoir, me and Talib. So this is for Arthur Longworth, First Place Memoir, 2010, Walla Walla IMU. The bread is moving, a small piece broken off of what was pushed through the narrow cuff port to me earlier that morning. A horde of tiny ants have surrounded it, are beneath it, hefting it up on little ant shoulders as they struggle to carry it back to where they live, a crack on the concrete floor a short distance away. Their task appears impossible, but the bread, I know, will soon make it to the crack. It always does. Why do I do this? I continue watching the ants, looking down at them from where I sit cross-legged on the cell floor in stinking orange coveralls. Because they're living beings? In some way like me? I'm still alive, aren't I? It's hard for me to be certain of anything in this place anymore. I haven't spoken in months. What do I actually have to verify that I am still alive? Focus. I redirect my mind, aware that it is necessary to keep it on a short leash here, to rein it in when I feel it slipping, or run the risk of it leaving altogether. Strange things happen to minds in this place. Weak minds break quickly, strong ones later on. I return my attention to the ants, and I realize that I know why it is I do this for them. Because they provide for me a sense that I matter. Yes, that I am in fact still alive.
Padding barefoot back and forth on the cold concrete floor, I stop for a moment to itch. My legs are on fire, my arms, my chest, and scalp. It's because of the bugs, ones that I can barely see, am only able to make out when examining myself closely, lots of them running everywhere. If not for the itch, they might remain unnoticed, that and the small red bumps. But I know there isn't anything I can do, so I don't dwell on it. Itch and move on. Hearing the electronic clack of the heavy steel gate outside of my cell, I go immediately to the door and look out through its narrow slat of unbreakable glass. It's what I do anytime I hear this sound that my ears have become tuned for because it precedes anything that happens here. I see the squad out there in full force in front of the control center, which is all that is visible to me, all that is visible from any cell in IMU. They are bringing someone in. A minute later, he appears, surrounded by guards as he shuffles around the corner. 2 guards have hold of him directly, gripping him tightly by the shoulder and elbow, apparently feeling it is necessary despite the network of chains restraining him, the leash he is connected to, the white cloth sack pulled over his head. As he is pushed forward, it takes me only a second to recognize him. Even with the bag over his head, it would be impossible to mistake Donald Stook for anyone other than who he is. Angry red slashes cover his forearms, dozens of them, maybe more than 100. Vestiges of the times that he's tried to kill himself. And beneath the orange coveralls, I know there are more scars, burn scars. His legs are covered with them from the times he hasn't had anything to cut himself with, when he's wrapped his legs in toilet paper instead and lit it on fire. I remain at the door watching as the guards leave. One of them carrying the orange coveralls that Stook had been wearing. The bag that was over his head is carried by another who also has the chains and a leash. Now that they are gone, I listen. Stook is ranting, an angry, nonsensical tirade that I can hear through the otherwise impenetrable wall. There is no way for me to talk to him when he is like this, I already know. Besides, I'm not sure my voice would work, even if I were to try. I start scratching again.
Uncover that window. Hearing the words used so close and so loud, I push myself up from the floor. Going to the cell door, I look out. Come on, you crazy bastard. It is a guard in front of Stook's cell. I watch as he raises the heavy rubber mallet he has brought with him, bringing it down on the cell floor, banging out another series of loud raps. Uncover the window. It's been nearly 24 hours since Stook was brought in, and they've been giving him the treatment ever since. Coming to his cell door every half hour and banging on it with rubber mallets, trying to rile him verbally, ridiculing him, making certain that he isn't able to sleep. And Stook, the last few times, begging them for water. They haven't turned it on for him since he's been here. Each time he asks, they only laugh at him. Stook, I know, is doing exactly what it is they want him to do. You cannot cover the glass slat in your room here. Doing it is interpreted as a direct expression of defiance, and it is not tolerated. You will be beaten for it. Crazy fuck, the guard says. You're going to get what you're asking for. I promise you that. Watching him closely, I note that his eyes have changed. They seem venomous, hate-filled. Reflecting now what I believe is a glimpse of his psychosis, guards being as susceptible in their own way to the effects of this environment. Long-term exposure being what creates the real monsters, both guards and prisoner. You hear what I'm telling you? He screams it suddenly, unexpectedly, as loud as he can, lashing out simultaneously at the cell door with his heavy, booted foot. A thought comes to me as I watch him leave the block. Stook is in a strip cell with nothing. What can he possibly have covered his window with?
Between violent, gagging coughs, I press a wet t-shirt over my mouth and nose, trying to fend off the invisible, burning gas. My eyes feel as they've been doused in acid. Face down on the floor, I do what I can do to get away from it, but it's useless. It's everywhere. In the confined space of the cell, there is no escaping it. The grinding sound of the cell door coming open breaks into my consciousness. I go to the door, still pressing the t-shirt against my face, and look out at the narrow slat. A mass of guards are assembled in front of Stook's cell. More than a dozen, all wearing helmets and gas masks. 6 completely suited up in full riot gear. When the cell door clangs fully open, the riot-suited guards rush forward, blue-hued bolts of cracking electricity arching out in front of the shield. Once they are inside the cell, I am no longer able to see them. I fall into a fit of gagging coughs. The sound of what is happening next door comes through the coughing. Riot batons smacking naked flesh. The dull thudding of gloved fists, boots. Stook begins to scream a sound of an animal being savagely beaten. And it continues for some minutes, the screaming and the beating. Now begging, desperate, fevered pleas, unintelligible. The guards drag Stook out of the cell and into the view face down, wrists, ankles, chained behind the small of his back. Less than a dozen feet from me, they drop him. Lifting his head, Stook opens his mouth. One of the guards responds by kicking him 8 or 9 times in quick succession, twice contacting solidly with his head. After his kicks, Stook isn't able to scream anymore or beg. Face flat on the concrete and unmoving, he no longer appears conscious. I notice that he is covered in shit, literally, smeared over every part of him. Real shit, caked into his hair. It is this, I realize, that he must have covered the window of the cell door with. Emerging from the cell again, the guards take hold of Stook's chains and begin to pull him across the floor. I know where they are taking him, to one of the large rooms that have no ceiling. They will lay him out there on the concrete near one of the drains, still in chains, and spray him down with a hose. I know because, like countless others, I've been through it myself. And they'll make him lie there for hours, no doubt. The fact that it is winter will quickly become part of the punishment.
I am waiting at the cell door, watching when Stook is finally brought back into the block. I see that he is shivery. His naked body quakes as he shuffles forward blindly, cloth bag pulled over his head. The guards direct him into the shower at the end of the line of cells. Cuffing his wrists, they secure him in a standing position. There is no way now for him to sit down, nor even lower himself enough to kneel. The time Stook spent chained to the bars spanned 3 different shifts, 16 hours. He was given neither anything to eat or drink during this time. And despite having no respite from the shackles, he was forced to relieve himself where he stood. When guards finally did come to get him, he was no longer conscious, his ranting, crying, whimpering all having long ceased. He hung from the bars by his cuffed wrists. I watched as they once again dragged him out of the block, not speaking, their faces angry, intent. After they left, I remember being struck by something I was already well aware of. It is the fact that what they dragged out of the cell block that day, they in no way regarded as human. And it wasn't only because it was Stook. If it were me, it would be the same. Has been. If it were you, don't fucking kid yourself. There would be no difference either.
Vera Montgomery, 1977 poetry winner. Solidarity with cataracts. At 3:25 yesterday morning, I awakened to the staccato wails of a sister in sky-high pain, and the camp was sister-packed. I screamed, I shouted, I banged, I yelled, I hollered, I cursed, and the sister of yesterday's wails carries surgical scars today. All the while, I wondered, as I screamed, I shouted, I banged, I yelled, I hollered, I cursed, where was solidarity? One afternoon, a sister wept, and I wept inside for the wrecking crew's sisters. I can't erase this scene. A water-soaked mountain of broken, empty toiletries, shredded literature, cut-up garments, and atop the heap are sisters' loved ones, pictures, hate torn to bits. All the while, I stood and wondered, where was solidarity? All camps install a stool pigeon snitch box. The box is never idle, cause Louise stole an extra slice of bread. Jeanette is high. How can Dottie go on a furlough when she has walked on the grass? Ann bought commissary for Rose cause they play chicks. Rita stole a pair of chartreuse state sneakers. Vivian smokes in bed. How can Kasha go home to attend her Dad's funeral while not in good standing? Maria was playing Stink Finger in the movie. And as I robbed the camp keeper's stool pigeon snitch box notes, I wondered, where was solidarity?
Reading for Hal Cobb, First Place Essay 2010. The Pursuit of Character. Quote, "The evil men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones." End quote. Anthony and Julius Caesar. Being incarcerated often feels like being interred, dead to the world, dead to members of my family, dead to the church of my youth and former community. I imagine that if I am remembered, it is more likely for the evil that I have done, eclipsing any good that it may have occurred prior to or after all that surrounds my crime. There is nothing inherent in a punitive justice system that requires me to look within myself or take personal responsibility. The ongoing work of Shakespeare Behind Bars facilitates the rare occasion of personal reflection to take responsibility for my personal choices, as well as provide an opportunity to remember and encourage my goodness. It doesn't ignore my shadow self, but holds a mirror up to it, enabling me to embrace what I split from or hidden. The pursuit of character within these confines opens me up to all aspects of myself. Prospero is not finished with me yet, nor I with him. In 2003, it was my blindness, my overwhelming drive for control, my prejudice of those who navigate the world differently from me, and the desire to create a better world for my daughter that were my strongest connections to Prospero. If I took on the role again today, he would be a very different man, as I myself am in a very different place. As I'm encouraged to find a truth in the moment while working with Shakespeare's text, I see a spiritual dimension and correlation which I can apply to my everyday life. The only path to reconciliation of my past and my future is the present. Quote, "But release me from my bands with the help of your two hands." End quote. Prospero. The momentary absolution of audience applause dissipates as they are escorted from the prison visiting room, and I am strip searched before returning to the yard of my cell. Quote, as you from crimes would pardon be, let your indulgence set me free." End quote. Prospero. There is no priest to sacramentally absolve me of sin, remit my punishment, or negotiate recompense and reconciliation. Sadness still stalks me. The joy of connection with company and audience, potent human connection, fades as the reality of distance from those I hurt the most sinks in. A student of the documentary producer responded to a viewing of the film in a way that makes me realize my pursuit of character is hardly over. He said, "The happy ending to this movie would be to find the guy that is totally free in his concrete prison."
This is by Charles Culhane, First Prize Poetry, 1987, of Cold Places. I used to keep a list of foreign prisons: Lubyanka in Moscow, Portolova in Spain, California's Terminal Island, exotic names of cold places. I thought one day I'll make a poem listing all the names and conjure from their histories hard memories of humans among stone. I'm older now, the lists grow, the edges of papers curl, turn brown. The names still cry out without voice, without ear to hear them, and I can't remember what it was I was supposed to do, except live nearer the fire.
The small piece of bread sits alone on the concrete floor where it was laid some time before, unmolested, eliciting no corresponding activity from the crack only inches away. I am worried because the cell block was flooded the night before and the crack spent nearly the entire night submerged, the water having receded only several hours earlier. The bread is closer to the crack than I've ever placed it before, and still the ants haven't come for it. The discerning part of me already knows there is no way they could have survived. Yet I continue to sit here, waiting, holding on to this ridiculous hope. What else is there to do? I find myself wanting to cry, to break down and weep. No, that's not it. It's more than that, I realize. I want to die, truly. An ant appears then, unexpectedly, squeezing his way out of the jagged seam and taking off at a run. My spirit soars, and quickly he is followed by others.
Many prisoners spend their time surrounded by an almost palpable atmosphere of indifference. And it does not seem to register with most members of society that concrete, barbed wire, and rigidly determinate sentences do not facilitate change. The reality is that the tiniest cell in the deepest, darkest of prisons is a relatively inconsequential thing to somebody who does not feel like they are part of the world anyway. But the human mind will find a way to adapt, even if it means holding on to some of the habits that contributed to a destructive lifestyle in the first place. And I have seen so many people bounce from one distraction to the next, all in an effort merely to pass the time. And then, when their special day arrives, they are given $10 and simply let go.
Thank you very much to our readers. Please give them all another round of applause.